This is For the Governed, a podcast series brought to you by Athalonz. Here are your hosts, Tim Markison and Ron Cates.
Welcome to another Athalonz podcast. I'm Ron Cates. With me, as always, is Tim Markison, the CEO and founder of Athalonz. Today's subject is thinking about thinking. Now, Tim, you've been an engineer for like 40 years or so, I think. So You've been around a ton of smart people. So tell me what you think about thinking.
Okay, yeah. So I have been around engineers for over 40 years.
These are smart people.
Yeah, most of it has been as a patent attorney. So I work with the more creative types of engineers, and yeah, as a group, engineers are pretty smart. You kind of have to be to get through engineering school because there's a lot of math involved and then practical applications of that math. But what's interesting, what I found, and I've worked with thousands and thousands of engineers, is there's a very small percentage of them that are really what I would call creative thinkers that can come up with something new, come up with something that's patentable, and even a smaller percentage of engineers that come up with something that's really cool, like revolutionary, evolutionary kind of technologies.
So I want to make sure I understand. So even though these are all very smart people, most of them are good at applying some sort of predefined knowledge base to a problem.
Right. So I call that kind of task solvers. So
and that's critically important, say, right?
Yeah. So, if most engineers, you give them, identify the task or problems that they need to solve, they'll do a good job of solving it. And you need that to develop any high-tech product. The real creative thinkers are the ones that can identify what tasks that need to be solved to bring the new products, new technologies to market that others just can't envision.
So I noticed one of your habits, one of the things you're really good at, is you'll take something. Well, you have two great habits, I think. One is that you never decide that the way it's always been done is the best way to do it. You'll tear it apart and go, no, there might be a better way to do this. Just because we've done it for 300 years doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. And you've had some phenomenal inventions because of that.
Right.
Yeah. The other is that you're good at taking an existing set of X and applying it somewhere that it's never been applied before.
Yeah. So what I like to model after is a quote from Einstein. So he was asked one time, if you only had an hour to solve a problem and coming up with a solution to that, your life was dependent on coming up with a solution to that problem, how would you go about it? And Einstein responded that I would take the first 55 minutes to ask questions, because once I knew what right questions to answer, I could solve those in 5 minutes. So that really has stuck with me. And when I look at the creative thinkers, that's what they do. They question everything. Okay, like you were just saying, okay, just because this has been done this way forever, or this is what we do, does it make sense to continue on? How could we make it better? Is this the best way? What if we did this? What if we did that? To me, that's a huge part of creative thinking, is just being able to ask questions and figuring out what questions to ask. And a lot of the questions lead to nowhere. But as you continue to ask, it leads to paths that create new innovative thinking, create new technology. I mean, Steve Jobs was probably the classic example.
I was going to ask you for a contemporary example.
Yeah. With a lot of his visions, but the iPhone, it was like, well, who would want, this flat panel thing, without buttons and
no stylus because we have a finger.
Yeah. So,
that's going to fail.
Yeah. That was what a lot of people thought. And he stuck to his guns and, believed in it. And, we all know the outcome of that. It's changed cellular communication. It's changed how we live. But then it starts thinking about, well, why, even you've got this group of smart people, engineers, why are so few creative thinkers? And so that really...
So I can only name a few creative thinkers that are contemporary. Certainly Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, from Tesla.
Yeah.
Why can I only think of two when I know there's a ton of smart people out there?
Yeah. So, Bill Gates was another great example of a creative thinker. A lot of the creative thinkers that I know aren't well known, so some of the best engineers, some of the most brilliant people I've worked with, publicly they're behind the scenes kind of guys. So you wouldn't know if I mentioned their names.
But why aren't we producing, like out of school, just gazillions of creative thinkers?
I've been pondering that a lot. And our education system is focused on, we need to learn this. This is how we're going to test you on it, and we're going to grade you on how well you repeat what we've told you. We're not encouraged in our education system to ask questions. It's like, well, is this a subject I should be learning? Is this the way I should be tested on it? What should I be able to do with that? And it's not to knock the education system. We need the education system to teach us the fundamentals. I mean, if we can't read or write or do basic mathematics, we really can't do anything innovative.
Tim, here's my big frustration, though. My youngest daughter, when she was in middle school and high school, and I would try to help her with her math homework, she was being taught, just rote how to get the answer. And no understanding, no component of why this is or why this works. If it's in the tens column, what does that actually stand for? She didn't know. But she could get the answer right by following this rote, form of instructions to get an answer that'll do well on a test.
And I think that ties to a lot of engineers too, because they can follow the process the way you just described, but it's lacking the meaning. What's this for? What does 2 + 2 really mean? Well, it means I got 2 things here and I got 2 things here and I'm bringing it together. So now I have 4, but it's a lot of the education is missing that practical application. And that's part of creative thinking, to be able to put into context why we're learning these things, and not just, here's, memorize this because that's what we're being told you need to memorize. So, I look at my education, and it was, I went through law school, engineering school, but it was all, this is what you're going to learn. This is how you're going to do it. So, but I view that as learning the tools. So this is a hammer, you hit nails with it, but what can I do with that? It's that's lacking. And then you get into the workplace and it's like, well, you start off at the lower rung as an engineer. So, well, you do this, and then you move up a little bit. Okay. Well, now you do this. So there's at least in my career, there was never, outside of one boss that I had, there was never encouragement of me to be creative, to think out of the box, to try different things.
Do you think that ties into, again, with my kids, I taught them to question everything. And that got me into a lot of trouble with their teachers. Because I didn't want them just, take a rote set of facts and say, okay, if you say so. I wanted them to kind of demand an explanation of why this is. Just like you said before, 2 + 2, 2 times 10 is 20, but what does that stand for? Not just there's an X there, so I put this number here, but what does that actually mean? And they weren't teaching that.
And I'm not sure why, but I again, related it to my personal experience in education, I don't know if teachers don't know, or they're not encouraged or not allowed to give practical examples. But, when I'm working with training patent attorneys on how to write patents, one of the key elements that we have to do is we have to understand the technology. I can't do the math much anymore. I'd have to relearn it all. But I know the practical applications of what this circuit's supposed to do. So it's that kind of practical thinking. So with the skills that I've evolved in understanding the meaning behind the math, I can design almost any circuit, which then makes what I do as a patent attorney so much easier because everything I work with is a new invention. So, I've always analogized writing patents is like constantly studying for finals. I'm always having to learn something new and write a term paper about it.
In your work experience, did you have times where you were coming up with definitively better ideas by any objective measure, but they were not encouraged because that's just not how we do it?
In a lot of my jobs, yes. When I started my patent career at Motorola, and in the late 80s, early 90s, Motorola was very much into cycle time reduction and Six Sigma quality. So basically, let's do things better and faster. And they were having such success with that on production floor that they said, okay, all the corporate departments need to do this too. And the patent department was a corporate department. But my boss was like, hey, if you got ideas, try them. So I was given the freedom to try different ideas. And through the course of a year, came up with different approaches on working with inventors to write better patents. So I got to the point where our quality went up about 4x and the quantity went up about 3x.
And was that embraced by everyone?
That was embraced by senior management in the patent department. And they asked me to go around and teach everybody in the patent department, and there was 150 attorneys at the time, on how to do these techniques. Because that was also part of cycle time reduction and Six Sigma quality, is you had to institutionalize it. So everybody had to learn it and practice it. And, for me, I was young in my career. I think I was finishing law school as I was coming up with this idea. So I'm a year out of law school. And most of the attorneys in the department had been there 10, 15, 20 years. So here's this fresh out of law school.
They loved you, I bet.
Yes, I was so well received because I was fresh out of law school telling them
Mr. Know-It-All.
how to do a job that they've been doing for 20 years. Yeah. But I remember one guy, every time I passed him in the hallway after this, he'd punch me in the arm because I changed the status quo.
So change is incredibly uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that a component of this?
Yes, I think...
Is there some risk involved? I'm going to do it differently.
Yeah.
What if it doesn't work? I know the way I've always done it works to an extent. Mm-hmm. This new way, I don't know. It's new to me.
Yeah, I think those are two critical components to creative thinking. Being a risk taker, not afraid to fail, and embracing change. And I think, from my experiences, mid-management gets to be in mid-management because they are risk adverse. They don't like change. So they don't like that happening underneath them. So I think that helps stifle, is a big contributor to stifling creativity. So the whole system, from our education to the corporate environment, really doesn't encourage creative thinking. It dissuades it. So it's the risk taker, the one that's not afraid to fail, that embraces change, that are the creative thinkers, and that's a very, very small percentage of the people. But I don't think it has to be that way. I'm an inventor on over 300 patents. I view myself as a creative thinker. I can see things and start to put them together in new ways. But I don't think, that I have a unique talent for that. I think most people that are somewhat intelligent to very intelligent can, if they would embrace those skills, it's like anything. If you work at it, you can develop it.
It's been suppressed.
Yeah.
So as the founder and CEO of Athalonz, I feel like we have tremendous support for out-of-the-box thinking, for trying new things. You've created that. What do you think are some of the pieces that you put together to create that atmosphere here?
To me, it's encouraging people to take risks, to think, to be creative, to try out of the box thinking, because as you know, in the marketing side of things, we were just talking earlier. We each get dozens of emails a day. Hey, let us optimize your SEO. Hey, let us do this for you. Let us do that for you. But it's all cookie cutter stuff. So in order for us to stand out as a company, we have to embrace new things. We have to try things differently. And a majority of those things aren't going to produce the results that we hope for. But we have to...
we gather data each time.
Right.
And so we cut way back on the things that don't produce, and we do more of the things that do.
Right. But we have to be willing to Thomas Edison said, when he was asked about the light bulb, he goes, it took him 1,000 tries to find the right filament for the light bulb. And so they says, well, isn't that frustrating to have 1,000 failures? And he goes, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 ways how not to make a light bulb. Yeah, so I embrace that kind of thinking too, because you have to try things. You have to things, and they may not produce the results you want, but you build on that, like you were saying. I'd rather be reining people in than trying to cattle prod them to do things. So that's the environment that we've created here.